The greatest leaders in business look for the emerging stories in their organization and use the data to choose their preferred outcome. What outcome do you want in your business? Listen to the stories of industry veterans, coaches, and consultants so you can choose your preferred business outcome. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I want to tell you a little bit about the story of why I started this podcast. And it has a lot to do with, my ego and the fact that I thought I was a really, really smart guy. And then I could just outsmart everyone else. But then I just started to figure out I do some mathematics and data and analytics, and I started to realize I just can't scale as fast as everyone else, not individually, but just in terms of keeping up with everyone else. So how could I get beyond that? And I started to realize, what if instead of me trying to learn everything, I just had people that I could reach out to, pick up my phone and say, hey, what have you been doing for the last 25 years? Can you teach me something? And they could tell me in 3 minutes. Well, now that becomes power. I also found out that it was all about my blind spots, all those things that I didn't know anything about. I can pick up the phone now and say, hey, what do you see? And their perspective of the world automatically starts to tell me where my blind spots are. So this podcast is all about bringing the experts, the seasoned veterans, the people who've been there and done that, they've got the cuts, bruises, and scars to prove it, and telling us about the blind spots that they have seen as they've gone through their journey so that maybe you don't have to. So I want to start today with Craig Mathews. Craig, how are you doing?
Good to be here, Vinay.
Yeah, excited to have you and excited to get into this conversation. But before we do, Craig, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. I want to tell everyone kind of what we've got coming up in the next week or so. I'll get Kay Sudhar, who is coming on in about a week and a half. Focus and intention as a business leader. If those two words, focus and intention, don't resonate with you, I think you ought to listen to this podcast. If they do resonate with you, I think you ought to listen to this podcast. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else in this world that hold a leader back outside of understanding where they need to be focused, and that's driven from their intention. About a week out, I've got Dr. Holly Sullinger, local to the Raleigh area, local to me. And she's the topic of our podcast is storytelling from the data, a practical approach. I mean, if you've heard any of my talks in the past, you know that I love data and how rich data is in being able to tell a story from it. But being able to tell the story is the magic. Being able to see the numbers and start to say, I understand the narrative that goes along with this. So many of us have the wrong narrative. So Dr. Holly is going to take us through how she starts to see the story in the data. But today is Craig Mathews, building a leadership and development ecosystem. Gosh, and again, if that sort of topic doesn't resonate with you, well, it does with me, building leaders. So, and I just love this idea of a rising tide raises all ships. Craig, is that a fair way to think about how building that leadership development ecosystem? Is that a way you think about it as well?
That's a big part of it. Yeah. And I guess as we looked at, so Jeff Nishwitz is my business partner at Cardivera. And we created the company because we saw that a lot of the training and guidance for growing leadership was just not really working that well. Because if I'm talking at you, how are you going to learn leadership? Yeah, you can get little principles here and there, but until you kind of apply it and start seeing what's happening in the world, it's kind of tough to actually get the change that you're looking for.
I will agree. So everyone who's listening, I want to do a little bit of a background on Craig and why I invited him, because I think you've already gotten a little bit of a glimpse of the way he talks and thinks, right? So known as a revenue architect and a big thinker, I've written down a bunch of notes here about Craig, because there's a lot to cover about Craig. Business marketing strategist, leadership development enthusiast. I love this thread of just developing and building others as a core thread to the way he thinks and what drives. And I'm big on purpose. And if you have that kind of purpose, it really does bias the way you think about things and how big you think. He's a chief Thinkologist at Big Think, business and marketing strategy and marketing agency, the CEO of Cardivera, a leadership development ecosystem. He's a co-host of the Leadership Junkies. I did that with him and Jeff Nishwitz.
Yep.
I recommend that you check that out. Fabulous, fabulous guests on there. He's got an MBA from UNC Business School, serial entrepreneur, been married to Julie, your sweetheart, for the last 30 years. Got two
33
sons.
years.
33 years.
Yep. Just married off my son too.
And you just married off your son too. So, Craig, a rich life.
Yep.
A rich, healthy life. What do you think? Talk to me about mindset. Or I stopped using the word mindset. I started to talk about this idea of heart set. Talk to me about the heart set that got you there. And
I'd say it is totally in alignment between personal life and professional life. As we talk about leadership development, the gist of what we teach is it's people first. When you take care of your people take care of everything else, right? And in the same way, if you take that into your personal life, when, like, my wife is a teacher, she's going nuts right now because she's teaching an advanced placement Spanish class that's really kicking her butt right now because she has to do a lot of reading and preparation and so forth for it. And what do I do in that midst? While she's going through the stress, I pick up the slack. And likewise, when I'm going through a more stressful time, she picks up the slack. And so it's kind of taking care of the people around you and making sure that it's not about 50-50. It's about I'm all in, right?
Yeah. So there's a word I've been starting to use a lot more. It's this tension, right? There's always this tension on the wire, right? Sometimes it's being pulled to the right, sometimes it's being pulled to the left. So I might say that this whole idea of work-life balance might actually be the wrong analogy. It's this work-life tension, right? Because it ebbs and flows, right? It's
a spectrum.
Times, right? Yeah, exactly. So this people first, and I want to kind of dig in here a little bit, right? I think this is, and I'm going to talk from a personal place. This starting with that work-life balance. Look, I've got my own personal desires. I've got my own my intents, my wants, my needs, right? I'm not going to that company for charity's sake. I'm going there because it's hopefully on the roadmap to my success. As a leader, I'm thinking first selfishly, and I think selfishly has kind of got a little bit too much of a bad name associated with it. You need to be able to breathe first before you can resuscitate others, right? You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that tension between selfish and serving others, people first.
Great question, because ultimately, if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of anybody else, right? And if you're not in a good place emotionally, physically, whatever, it's going to be really difficult for you to help somebody else in that same realm. Like, I am intentional about some of the things that I do to keep my attitude, my energy at the level that it is, so that I can be better for those people around me. And frankly, so I'll have a better quality of life.
Yeah. So talk to me about, give me like a framework, right? Because it's not about, I walk in every day, or is it? I walk in every day, I think about myself first and then people second, because that's not people first. Give me how someone could approach that.
Yeah. So if you think about what is the outcome you ultimately want, right? You want to be recognized as a great leader. You want to be, you want your company to grow. You want to hit certain revenue targets, make more money, whatever those things are, better quality relationships. All that comes from one key activity, and that is taking care of the people around you. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that, you will find, like your prior podcast guest was talking about, you will find that people leave your company because they don't like what's going on. You will find that it's a lot more difficult to hire that person to replace them. It's going to take a long time to get them up to speed. So it's much less expensive to keep the good people and to treat them well and treat them in a way that you would want to. It's like Zig Ziglar said, he said, sometimes people will ask me, well, what happens if I train this person, to the nth degree and then they leave? He said, well, the question really is, what happens if you don't and they stay?
That's right. So I love my analogies, Craig. You probably hear 100 of them in the course of this. But I was in Seattle visiting my brother, and he took me to this place in Seattle called Discovery Park. Beautiful place, and you walk to this wooded place, and all of a sudden you're on the top of this cliff, about 200 feet out of the water, looking out over the bay. It's just gorgeous. And the analogy I'm making here is as we're going through this, we're going up this winding path, and some other people kind of climb up the rocks and kind of get onto the path at the same time. My brother and I are both, gregarious people. We'll talk to anybody and have a conversation with them. We start having a conversation with them. They start telling us a little about the path and some other parts of the trail and stuff. And I think about leadership as kind of that trail, right? Mm-hmm. You've got your own way to get to that promised land, which is that bluff or that cliff that you get with the beautiful perspective and view. You're going to meet some people along the way, but if you can have a good conversation with them, they keep walking alongside of you. You're taking care of yourself in the sense that I know what direction I'm going in, but they happen to be on that path for a little while. Gosh, what a beautiful way. I mean, I'm talking about this conversation I had on a trail 7 years later. Isn't that the way? That's the way I see it. Is that kind of the way you see it as well?
I not only have I seen it that way, I've experienced it that way. And I think, you have been involved in startups as I have. And when you're first getting started, you don't have any revenue coming in. You're enlisting people who believe in what you're up to, and they trust you. Right. And so if you haven't built good relationships, that's probably a lot more difficult to do. But when you have these people around you who are going to fight for you and fight to keep your vision alive, which is very, very different than just having hired hands. So as you're getting things started, you have this group of people around you that, everybody's hoping that they're going to get something out of it. But frankly, some of them are just there for the ride.
Our topic is building a leadership development ecosystem. Mm-hmm. How does this, what we're talking about here is this idea of being a leader and kind of creating this ethos, this feeling, this environment, culture of kind of supporting and looking out for each other. How does
for us at us at Cardivera, we call Cardivera the leadership development ecosystem, because what we've done is we've looked at the different aspects of what it takes to grow a leader. Okay. And part of it is the training, being around people, being able to ask questions, things like that. To your point, exposing some of those blind spots so that they're not, just shaking in the wind. But in addition to that, it's giving them some practical experiences where they can see for themselves how they're showing up. So let me just give you an example. If we look at a mystery trip, one of the things that we're planning to, kind of got sidetracked with COVID, but one of the things that we had planned on initially was you have a mystery trip. You show up at the airport. You have no idea where you're going, right? You've paid for this in advance through us, and we're going to send you somewhere. You go to the city. You have no idea where you're going. You have no plans for a hotel. You don't know where you're going to eat, and you're with a group of people. Now, what kind of problems do you think might show up there, Vinay?
Oh gosh, I'm loving this idea.
Exactly. Some people, 20% love it. The other people are like, oh my gosh, I would never do anything like that.
Yeah, there's a resourcefulness issue, right?
Yes.
People start to question themselves. Well, where am I going? What do I need? It doesn't matter. You'll figure it out, right?
Okay, now to you, it doesn't matter, right? But to certain people, it depends on how they're wired. Some people want to have everything nailed down. They have to have every I dotted, every T crossed. And so as soon as they find out where they're going, they're researching, they're trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to stay? What are we going to do? And other people like us are just going to kind of go with it, watch the other people who are stressing over it, laugh at them, and enjoy the process. And so seeing the different styles show up, when we have a discussion at the end of the day, after that first day, after the second day, and we start talking about how did you respond in this situation, there are some really big ahas.
Yeah. Wow. That's a fabulous. I love that idea. That's I think I'm going to do that with my kids.
That's right. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It's kind of it's a crucible in and of itself, right? You kind of put them in and just, they get to go through the experience, and you get them to recount, and they start to say, wait, I didn't really need to know to land on my feet. And that gives them that self-reliance, that skill that we've kind of tamped down for such a long time. You have the opportunity to bring those things back up.
Yeah. So imagine at the end of the first day, you find out you're that person that is OCD, has to have everything in order. So the challenge would be to you, what happens if you just step back and let things happen? Let somebody else be in control tomorrow. and how would that affect your experience during this? And try it out, just try it on, see how that works. And likewise, if we were doing a mastermind, we would have engagement opportunities. Like, for example, we would be connecting with a local nonprofit. We are in service during one of those days. Now, what happens when you're in service is you get to see how other people work. You then decide, oh, I want to work with Vinay, or I don't want to work with Vinay, right? So you kind of understand how people operate, and that helps to either build or shortcut, your relationship development as well.
So I feel like there's a through line in most everything that happens in the world. Just this lowest common denominator. And I don't want to say lowest common denominator, just a common denominator, right? And it is this idea that I've learned, I think, in marketing practice, right? The first stage for any customer is awareness, right? The next is engagement. And then the last one is sort of decision or ownership. And I think what you're telling me here is at the end of the first day, all of a sudden, even though something that is regular and routine, you get on a flight, you land somewhere, you haven't had any context. All of a sudden, you're completely aware of something that you do innately, but just don't even realize. Is that right?
Yeah, but you're also getting feedback from people. So it's really exposing those blind spots like you do on this podcast. It's about being able to see yourself differently and see yourself through other people's eyes. Of course, we have to have some level of trust to be able to do some sharing, but you also have Jeff and me facilitating some of that so that it's a more less contentious prospect. Although contention can be a learning tool itself at the same time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I got to imagine there's people who are wound up pretty tight at the end of the day.
Yeah,
because they don't like that. So keep telling me about this leadership development ecosystem. So there's this opportunity for them to become aware of what they really need and what they want.
Exactly. And then what we also provide is a Sherpa. So, Jeff, me, some of the team will eventually have is there to help you to determine, okay, what is your path? Where do you need to develop? What are the key skills that maybe you're lacking? Now we've seen you in action. Here are some things that we would recommend going on. So there's an aspect of coaching to that, but the Sherpa in our mind is a combination of salesperson / coach, right? Because if we have a wide variety of offerings at Cardivera, we want to help you find the right thing for you that's going to serve you, but that's also going to make money for us. Yeah,
wow. So I always like to push back just sometimes just to be the devil's advocate. But look, and I'm kind of reflecting on myself where I used to be. If you had asked me about what feelings mean nothing 20 years ago, it was all about data. I like to believe I've come some distance.
So you have two feelings now, huh?
That's right. This is all squishy stuff, right? I mean, we're not talking about numbers. We're not talking about revenue. We're talking about kind of just getting an understanding of yourself. How does that make a difference? I mean, why should someone embark on this journey? I mean, this is all, it's all nice for us to sing Kumbaya. Sure. Is that what it is?
Yes and no, because there's different, what we found is there are different makeups of leaders. Some leaders really want to, they have in their mission, in their core DNA, to be of service to other people around them. And their highest and best is to build those people around them. Those would be our core. Right? Those are the people that we would say, okay, fully aligned with what we're doing. We will give you the tools to help you build those people so that they can have great lives as well as you. The other side of that is you have some people who they think that they're servant leaders, but they're really not. It's like we had Tommy Spalding on our podcast, and he said, 90% of people think that they're servant leaders, only 10% are. And so if that's the case, where are things breaking down? Where are you really a lot more focused on your own needs, your own desires than those around you? Is it a problem to be focused on yourself? No. Enlightened selfishness is what we're really looking for, right? And that enlightened selfishness, and I'll say that was coined from one of my clients. Enlightened selfishness allows us to be in that place where we know what we want and we get what we want, but not at the expense of somebody else.
So that, and there's a lot to read in between the lines there, and just that last piece there, right? And not at the expense of somebody else. And I think there's a surface level understanding of that. But what I heard when I say, and not at the expense of someone else's, there truly has to be a deeper understanding of others first, and what drives them, what motivates them, why they are. And if you, in order to be able to do that, that enlightened selfishness is your compassionate action because you understand others, right?
Sure. Yeah. And
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that what I find is that when we talk about business, we put up this artificial barrier between us and the person around us, because we think it's business, therefore it has to be money generating, and therefore we can't talk about feelings, we can't talk about the personal stuff. But really, if you don't, you're not going to get the most out of the people.
Yeah.
And so actually getting to know people, understanding what's driving them, not so that you can use them, but so that you can empower them. So that if somebody says, I'm really struggling with my child, with my marriage relationship, my dog just died, whatever those things are, now we know, hey, we can intervene. There's some things that we can do. We can put them in touch with a specialist. We can be there to listen to them, because maybe they don't have that space. Give them a little time off. Do whatever we need to do so that they know that we care, but also so that we can help them on their path to recovery so that they can be the best person that they can be. That helps us in the business world, but it also helps them in the personal side. How is that a loss in any way?
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh, there's a story that I'm going to share with you here that came up to me. I just kind of had a revelation. I mean, as soon as you're starting to say this, just came. I can't wait for him to finish because I got to tell the story, because this is exactly what I was thinking. So a couple of weeks ago, my 12-year-old son was sitting at the dinner table. I asked him, "Had you finished your homework?" And he said, "No," and kind of just shrugged his shoulders. I said, "Oh, what? That's not an appropriate response. Like you're supposed to." You're supposed to say you're finished your work. Why haven't you finished work? We go into this whole thing, and eventually you could see he just wasn't interested in the conversation anymore. He's just kind of disengaged, not making eye contact. He said, "I guess I'm just lazy." And all of a sudden you can feel like the lava is starting to boil up from the top, right? And I stopped for a second. I was like, wait, hold on a second. Let me inspect this, because then it kind of just hit me. People have used this word, a download. It kind of just. I just thought, I was like, well, hold on a second. There's some brilliance in what this kid is doing here. His laundry is done for him, whether he folds it or not, that's another question, right? Folds it properly. He's got a warm place to live, a warm bed to sleep in, gets food. He gets driven to school. He gets to go to his activities. And we all do it because we love him. And all he's got to do is homework, right?
The great enablers.
Yeah, that's right. So you were talking about enlightened selfishness. I'm almost thinking about there's almost this enlightened laziness where you talk about this idea that if I've got some of my people, I call them my experts, because they understand things I can't do.
Sure.
And I say, hey, can I help you? They're like, no, but I just stand back. I'll take care of it. I was like, well, I got a problem. They said, no, I'll take care of it. And I love that, because they're pushing me away, saying, I will take care of it. I know what the vision is here. I know what the task to get done is. Stay away.
Yeah.
You'll just muck it up. And it's almost as though that by allowing people to lean into that role and leaning into them, and giving them that vision, we get to move into this enlightened laziness.
I think that's really interesting. So I would guess your son so if you turn it the right way, you can help him become an entrepreneur, because what do entrepreneurs do? The best entrepreneurs build systems and build people so that they don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
So, ultimately just teach them, hey, if you really want to be lazy, become an entrepreneur. There's a lot of work up front.
Well, so this is funny. I've had this conversation with a couple of people about this, and even the lazy person actually has to do some work, but
Sure.
really we want to do I mean, put 1 unit of, and a lot of people focus on effective versus efficiency, right? I want to put 1 unit of work and get 100 units of output, right?
That'd be great.
I mean, that's the definition.
We want to do that with money too.
Right? Yeah, exactly. 100% return on any dollar I put into the market, right? That would be fantastic. Right. But so this is interesting. I mean, almost kind of as like as a goalpost for why you should invest in your people, invest time in your people, is you want to get them to say, hey, step out of the way. Because
absolutely. That's definitely one of the goals. I'd say, so I see it as multifaceted, right? At the end of the day, we're looking at, it's a business. It has to make money. It has to do the things. It has to, do it at some level of efficiency so that we actually have a profit at the end of the day, right? So to do that, we have to have our people working at least somewhat productively, and we have to have whatever systems to support them. Now, if you look at your systems, if you look at your people, you look at your finance, and you look at your marketing, all the different pieces that you would have in your business, what's the common foundation? It's people. People build systems, people build marketing, people do the finance work. If you don't have the people, you don't have anything.
That's right.
So if you don't take care of your people, what's going to happen to your company? People are going to leave, right? Systems are going to break. Your marketing is going to suck, whatever those things are. And it just, I just don't see how people can see it another way other than you got to take care of your people. Now, I've had some really good experiences. I've been an executive at a company in town called McKim & Creed, great engineering firm. And that was a company that was a people first organization. They genuinely cared about the people. I was part of the corporate leadership team, and we would talk about, what are we doing for our people? How do we do these things? Went down to Wilmington, one of the, used to be the headquarters for the company, and got down there, and it happened to be National Dentist Day. The receptionist was dressed up as a tube of toothpaste. The HR manager was dressed up as the tooth fairy. Mike Creed, the CEO, was out playing guitar, and they were having a little jam session, and there was, free food for everybody. It was just a way to celebrate the people in the organization.
Yeah. And, I have a lot of remote employees, remote in the sense that they're not in the United States, they're outside the United States. All
sure.
Over the world, right? I'll probably, I'd like to change that, but I likely will not meet a lot of them. And I had one lady that I work with, she happens to be in Kenya. And I told her one day, I said, I know why you like me. And she said, wait, what do you mean? I said, you're always early to the conversations, and that means a lot to me. She said, well, I didn't know you noticed. So I said, I noticed you're always earlier than me. And there's kind of a little competition to see who can get on earlier, right? which I love. That's a healthy sort of tension there. And she said, well, how do you go back to this whole thing? Why do you know that? Like I said, an hour and a half ago, you made a decision that was in my best interest. She kind of looked at me and said, you were thinking about finishing your task on time so that you could be prepared and ready for our call, so you could be on a minute before me. Did you not? I mean, it wasn't really about the hour and a half, right? It could have been 73 minutes, right? Right. But the point is, I'm getting some of her time and attention, and she's thinking about me off the ball, right? The way my soccer coach used to tell me is the teams that win soccer matches are the ones that have the players that are moving off the ball, right? Not the one who's got the ball as being the superstar, all the other 10 players on the field. And if you can create a company that has everyone else moving off the ball, oh gosh, that's a team that should be part of, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you here, is this idea, if you can get everyone else to kind of, it's a negative connotation, drink the Kool-Aid, right? But if you can get everyone else to be, want to show up at work because they can't wait to get
absolutely
done what they want to, that's a fabulous place to be.
Yeah. How can you make it fun for people? How can you help them to enjoy their work? How can you train them better than they ever thought possible? Because, frankly, what they got at school, there's a half-life to that education.
Yeah.
If they're not constant, I used to run IT, right? So my guys, if they weren't constantly being trained, they were falling way behind.
I love that. There's a half-life to your education.
It's like my MBA. Yeah, there's definitely a half-life to that too. Things change. The world is different now. When we were going through, Amazon was just getting started and didn't have any profit.
Yeah. Wow. So what do you think are the biggest challenges? I think people are always trying to find out the how. I might challenge them and say, put the how to aside. I actually told my kids, stop figuring out how to do the math problems, figure out why you're doing math problems, because then
Yep.
you'll ask the right questions to do the how.
Yep.
Is that a transformation that you believe leaders should go through as well? That shift to why as opposed to the how? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would look at it as what kind of leader do you want to be?
Okay.
Right. And so if you ask that question, it's getting to the why, but it's really saying, what's the outcome here? Do I want to be a leader that other people want to follow? Do I want to be a leader that makes that makes budget? Do I want to be a leader that inspires others? Or do I want to be a leader that crushes them under the foot, but I still get my profit and I get what I want?
Is there a right answer to that question?
Well, depends on your frame of reference and your I guess your philosophy of life, right? What goes around comes around. And so if you're going to crush people, ultimately it's going to come back and bite you. My guess is if you're doing that at work, you're doing that at home. You're probably not having the best quality of life. You're probably not taking care of yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I don't know, for me, as I look at a relationship, I'm looking at it as an infinite game, right? Yeah. So you talk about the infinite game versus the finite game. When I got married, it was for life. And I when we had a discussion one time and we had some, there was some heated discussion and my wife said, well, do you want a divorce? I said, not only do I not, but we'll never use the D word, right? That's just not an option. So we will figure out how to have a great relationship. This is just a minor setback.
And that doesn't mean that the path forward is strewn with rose petals.
No,
right?
Not at all. No, it means that you have to do some work. Relationships are not always easy. Now they get easier when you put more into it. And if you have the other person has a similar viewpoint. Now, if you have, if one person is really working towards the relationship and the other person is not really committed, that's something totally different.
Yeah. So I love this idea of the marriage and just as kind of a model here. And it doesn't have to be sort of a marriage of love, right? I mean,
sure.
Because
business partnerships, same thing.
Right. Business partnerships, right? It's just a relationship. It doesn't have to be about hugs and kisses.
Right.
It can be about how, it's the questions like, how was your kid's football game this weekend, right?
And actually caring.
Yeah.
And when you ask that question, not just asking it perfunctorily, although, some people could say, okay, check that mark, right? I did that. That's better than somebody not doing it at all. But people can see through, do you actually care? Is there a follow-up question? Oh, really? So he got a home run. So how did that make you feel? How did he feel? Whatever that is.
So, and I think what I'm hearing here is, people talk about this idea of intent all the time, right? What is that source of the intent, right? If you're asking the question just to check the box, well, you're only going to get so much mileage out of it, right? But if your intent in asking the questions because you truly, deeply want to understand, it will respond differently, and that relationship will go many miles for you. Is that a fair way to say that?
It is. I will say that there are some people that are wired differently, and so we during our podcast we heard about this one guy who he finally understood that leadership is about people, and he decided that, oh, okay, I need to make it about the people, even though I'm not wired to do that. I will have my checklist of these are the things that I need to do to be a people-centric person. Now, in his mind, that was just the way he's done. He's probably, very data-driven and everything else, right? And so he had to have the checklist, but he cared enough to create the checklist.
Yeah. So let's come back again to this to the topic, right? Creating this ecosystem. So we're talking. We've been spending so much time talking about the leader, right? And kind of that self-introspection, that inquisitiveness into yourself, and what kind of leader am I? And am I true? What is my intent in talking to others? We haven't been talking about the ecosystem, but is there? So tell me, bridge that gap for me. Why have we been talking about the ecosystem? We've spent so much time talking about the leader.
Well, the ecosystem builds the leader, right? For what we have in Cardivera as the leadership development ecosystem, it is something that we have the experiential training, we have the online training, the Q&As, the retreats. masterminds, things like that. But we also have additional resources, that can come into play. So if you need a coach, if you need a mentor, those are the types of things that build the whole ecosystem to supporting that leader where they are. And I will say the leader can be anywhere in an organization, whether they have a title or not. And so that's our belief. And oftentimes you will find that leaders emerge from, quote unquote, the bottom of the organization because they show up with the attitude and the desire to serve the people around them.
Yeah, I like this, and I think there's another thing that you said that there's someone gave me a saying that says the same thing. What we do in a small way in our life, we do in a large way in our life, right? The way you work. If you're crushing people underfoot at work, you're probably doing that at home as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the stresses that you feel at work, you probably take home, and from home you take to work, right? So
yeah, and that's where we see that so many organizations tend to, maybe they have a little sign that says "No humans allowed," right? That's one of the things that Jeff talks about. And is that really true? Well, of course they wouldn't actually do that, but the way that they act seems like that. Oh no, that's drama. We don't want drama in here. Well, you can have emotions without drama. You can actually care about people without drama. And sometimes people need to vent. If you give them time to do that, then it allows you to essentially reduce a lot of the friction in the organization.
Yeah, which is why I'm liking this whole work-life tension even more, right? The balance, right? Because at some point in time, work is pulling, and sometimes home is pulling.
Sure.
Right?
And so think about when you go into a meeting, right? If you go into the meeting, people have all sorts of things going on in their heads when they walk into a meeting, or they step in, or they get onto a Zoom call, whatever it is. What if you take a few minutes and you say, okay, let's do a check-in. What's going on for you? Oh man, I've been battling with this, cold or whatever, whatever these things are, it's what's on the top of mind. And it can be serious. It can be lighthearted, whatever it is. Right. And you'll find over time, as you do that it becomes a lot more real because you build trust. But that's one of the things that we do to build trust is we actually have conversations. We allow people to be real, and we become vulnerable ourselves. One of our guests had talked about vulnerability is the shortcut to trust. Yeah. And it really is. When you step in and say, look, I don't have it all figured out. It's like you do when you first start the podcast, you're talking about, I had blind spots. I can't keep up. These are things that say, okay, I'm being a little vulnerable. I'm exposing myself, my soft underbelly. And when you do that, other people say, this is more of a genuine person. Maybe I can trust them more.
I've also found, this is almost, this is an interesting experience. So I've been doing a lot of work around the pest control industry. So I decided to go to a pest control conference. Mm-hmm. And they had these breakout sessions, and they had a lady who was going to talk about building authenticity. And I'm a gregarious guy. Again, I went and started making a bunch of friends, even though I didn't know them. 24 hours later, about 5 of them came up to me like, "Hey, Vinay, you got to go to this class." They're like, "This is like your stuff." I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." They were sitting around a circle, and she's the lady who's up front is asking questions to drop you further and further into the conversation. I got there, I said, I'm all into this thing. And what I didn't realize until later is that every time I gave an answer, I gave just the raw truth of what I saw. And it kept, not that it was my intention at all, but it kept dropping the level of, or the depth at which people were speaking to, right? Yeah. People came up to me afterwards. I was a little embarrassed at the end of that because I was thinking, I think I just shared a bunch of stuff with people in the industry I just got into. They're now going to call me back or let me in again. When in fact, I don't know, a dozen of them came up to me afterwards. One guy I'd never even seen came up to me and just gave me a hug. He was like, I just felt like I just need to do that. But what? Right? And I think what I'm hearing here, I'm just talking about our personal experiences. When you start to drop into that, here's the human that I am.
Yep.
It gives others the space to do that too and say,
absolutely.
It endears them to you.
It does. And when you allow them to do that and in a no judgment zone, and you follow up with them and you are consistent in that, the consistency and the vulnerability both contribute to that level of trust. And trust is the great empowerer of leadership, right? If you don't have people's trust, they're going to be working against you.
I was watching a show called Succession on HBO.
Yeah.
And, they've got this mercurial father that creates all the gravity in the world, right?
Yeah.
And all those around him, the planets feel as though they have absolutely no gravity of themselves, right?
Yep.
I was watching this one episode where they're talking about they go to this retreat, to this corporate retreat, and he's got some of the people on the floor barking like dogs or snorting like pigs. And I'm watching this, gosh, the only way that organization continues to run is as long as he's able to wield a bat.
Yep.
And as soon as he turns around, the cats will start to play with the mouse. I mean, the mice will play when the cat's away, right? But if you build this trust, that doesn't occur, does it?
No, it's very different. And what's interesting about Succession is, when I first started watching, I was like, this is interesting. It's a very different scale. It's billions and billions and so forth. But then I started to realize, this is kind of like Dunder Mifflin in a more serious manner.
Yeah, that's
right. So it's kind of like The Office, because they don't really say anything. It's like the brothers and sisters, they'll kind of talk about something, but they're not really talking about something. And so it's like, do people, what's really going on here? Is this a comedy with some, serious intent, or what's going on? Anyway, it's interesting, but you're right. It's when you have that kind of power where you're forcing your will upon somebody, that can only last so long. I mean, think about what happened to the Third Reich when Hitler died.
Oh, yeah.
So you had this really strong leader, and he was an incredible leader, even though he was very misguided.
Yeah.
But clearly he was doing something right. But then you have, somebody like the guy in Succession. It's like, would you really have somebody doing that? Now, I've been in a situation where you had, somebody like a what do you call them? A hypnotherapist, and you could have people barking or doing things like that, and it's really weird to see this thing work. But yeah, I guess you're hypnotizing people in a different way.
So look, there are people who will act based on feeling and gut, and there's people who will act on numbers. So I want you to give me a little bit of I'll call the evidence, right?
Okay.
What happens when people go through this ecosystem, right? What happens on the other side of it? What are the results? Because I think if there's people who say, yeah, it sounds nice, it's all squishy to me still, right?
Yeah.
What am I going to get out of it?
There's nothing squishy on the other side, because what's happening is when you empower your people, they will work harder for you than they would otherwise. Typically you're only going to get 5 out of 8 hours out of somebody anyway, right? But what if they're actually passionate about it?
That's right.
Maybe they'll give you 5.5 hours. Maybe they'll get you more during that time that they're actually active. But when you ask for something and they're anticipating what you're asking for, to your point of, talking to one of your guys about, doing whatever tech thing was, they're anticipating what you want because they actually want to help you because you're supporting them.
I've told people that my true gauge of my success as a leader is how many sleepless nights my people have. Right?
Ooh, I don't know.
They're solving my problems then, right?
I don't know if I want that metric.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the right language, right? But the point is that I remember when if my boss gave me a problem in our supervisors, and I couldn't go to sleep because I couldn't solve it. Yeah, that is actually, I think that's great leadership in that regard, that I have such ownership of solving the problem that I can't go to sleep until I solve it.
That's a really good point. Well, let's talk about, related to that, this whole thing called a PDP.
Okay.
Right now, when does a personal development plan come into play in most organizations?
When things are going wrong.
When things are going wrong. Why? That's stupid.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of the stupidest things you can do, because why are we going to focus so much time on the people who are doing the worst rather than allowing everybody to have a PDP so that everybody can get better? And then if somebody's just not meeting up to it, let them go, help them along the way as much as you can. But What if you put the same amount of time into your best performers as you do with your worst performers? You're going to get multiple times the output versus a fraction of the output.
Yeah, when you talk about things like flow state, right? I mean, flow state tends to be things that people love to do, and they are just incredibly efficient and effective at doing it, right?
Yep. And you can't interrupt them all the time.
That's right. That's right. But what if you could get every one of your employees to really spend? I mean, that would almost be the measure you want, right? The KPI is how much of their 5.5 hour day they actually spend in flow state, right? If they're spending 5 hours of their day in flow state, my gosh, you're going to have such a productive employee because they love it.
If you were able to get 2 hours out of each person, that would be pretty amazing compared to what the norm is. But if you think about it, the times that we schedule our meetings and the demands that we put on them with, instant access, whether it's Slack or something else, if we demand that they be always at our beck and call, they cannot enter that flow state.
Yeah, that's right. No matter how much they love it.
Yeah. So we have to in really create the environment so that they can do what they need to do best and they want to.
So give me some examples of what have happened to leaders after they've come out of the ecosystem, or they've been in the ecosystem for some time. What kind of gains have they seen or they realized?
Yeah, well, one of those things, is all about this podcast is the blind spots, because we have them. I mean, regardless of how good you are as a leader, there are always some things that you can improve. Could Patton have been better? Maybe, not be as forceful about, allowing, just throwing people at the problem, versus MacArthur or something like that. But I remember back in one of my startups, we were having a meeting and I had a leadership coach in there, and one of the guys came up, one of my business partners came up with an idea. He's like, "Oh, what if we do this?" I said, "No." And then Carol said, "Well, wait, Craig, clearly you've thought about this before. You just haven't communicated with him that you've thought about this before. So you need to let him know what's going on." And, "Oh, okay, this is why it won't work because of this, and this," right? So I've thought about it, but I was just telling him no, which didn't do anything good about wanting to make him want to contribute anymore, right? Yeah. So just having those little insights as to, it was definitely a blind spot for me.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes out of some of the training or one of the experiences that we create at Cardivera, they're going to see themselves differently, but they're also going to have a lot more clarity about the type of leader that they want to be. And back to your point of intention, they now know some of the things that they can be working toward. With the Sherpa, they can stay on track. Okay, we're working on this. I feel pretty good in this area. Great, let's move over to this other area. And so this constant improvement as we go along. So if you think about it, now we have a PDP for the leaders.
Yeah, wow. So someone told me that you shouldn't ask the question, what keeps you up at night? Because that's really it's kind of a personal question, right?
It's okay.
Yeah. And what I took out of that when someone told me that is, that may not be necessarily the right question, but because for a lot of leaders, what keeps them up at night is, I've got my own self-limiting beliefs, things that I believe I can and cannot do.
Yes.
Am I making the right choice here? Do I have the right people? And am I supporting them the way I want? And what I'm hearing here is that in the ecosystem, you start to get you get to push some of the weeds to the side, right? And start to see the actual flowers that exist in the garden. You get to start to see get some clarity in where you're heading, what your intention is, and maybe even the steps to get there. Am I saying that properly?
That's a good part of it. But when you really look at it, as we develop the leaders to develop their people, you're multiplying the output, you're multiplying the level of profitability ultimately in an organization, because now people are more focused on what the outcome is rather than, okay, I'm just going to do my job because they're not taking care of me enough to do more than that, right? So I'm going to focus on my job as being this narrowly defined thing. Whereas if I was really engaged, I'd be looking for new opportunities to serve, to expand my capabilities, to cross-train into other areas, to build relationships with people in different parts of the organization. All the types of things that would happen if I was actually interested in growing in my career and helping the business to grow.
How can someone tell if they're ready for this?
Say it's about curiosity. Jeff and I are big on curiosity. If you're not curious about what limitations you may have, if you're not curious about how you could be better, you're probably not going to be a good fit. So if you are curious about how you could improve the performance of your team by first starting with your leadership and then building the leadership capabilities of all of your team, then you're the right kind of fit.
Yeah, I think that was kind of what I was surmising when I talk to a lot of my customers and doing this analytics and trying to help them raise their level of leadership through some of the data and analytics and storytelling.
Yeah.
We usually start our first conversations. I start asking them lots of questions. I show them some things and I start saying, so what's going through your head? And if they're not asking lots of questions,
yeah,
I start finding out I'm not going to fight the ego. That's not my job. That's yours.
Exactly. And that's really the thing is if they don't care about their people, I'm not going to teach them how to do that. Right.
Right.
If they don't have any sense of that to begin with, then that's just they're just not a fit. Right. But if they're starting to say, I've seen this other organization, they're a people first organization. They're kicking butt. I want to be more like that. What do I need to do? Now, if they're curious about that and they're willing to make some changes, absolutely.
There's magic there. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
There's
now we can show some blind spots.
Well, we're kind of coming to the tail end here. And I wanted to ask you if someone were to kind of go into this journey and to maybe start to think, hey, this is something I need to do, whether it's to come work with you at Cardivera, which I love both you and Jeff, and I highly recommend that anyone who wants to go on this journey, they probably should reach out to you all, and you can find the contact information through me or what we put on the site when we publish the podcast. What are 3 things or 3 questions that people need to ask themselves to see if they're ready to kind of move to that next stage with this leadership journey? What would you say?
I'd say, first of all, are you interested in being better than you are now?
Yeah.
And if so, then great. That's a good start. Second, do you find that there are people around you that could do better? Maybe they're not fully engaged. We see engagement as being one of those things that can definitely kick up, but it doesn't happen by chance, right? And if you also see that maybe your organization is having lackluster results and you want to see a significant increase in not only profitability and productivity, but in just everybody's enjoyment of the work around there. Those are the types of things that I would say, now you're on the learning journey.
So I got you've got a fundamental interest in improving yourself, right?
Yeah.
There are others that you see that could also rise, and you want to be a party to that rise. And finally, the company that you're in, the organization that you're in, needs a little bit of a I don't know what I should go find a name. There's little paddles, right, to give it a jolt.
That's right.
And you don't know what that is, right? You want to start to give it that jolt, and you want to be a party to that jolt, right?
Sure. And that's part of the discovery process that we go through, is helping them understand, okay, we can look at the leader side, but, as a business strategist, I can also look at the, what's going on in the business, ask some questions around that too. So that feeds into leadership. Leadership is not all about strategic, but there is an aspect of that. To me, leadership is about the people first, and also about these other things. And some people get them reversed, so some people say, oh, well, it's all about strategy and setting the vision and things like that. People will come along. Well, okay, let's see how well that works for you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I want to say I've enjoyed that conversation. Anybody who's been listening in, first of all, thank you for listening in. There's so many of you that have started to listen in. I'm flattered by how many people have started coming. Thank you. Feel free to give comments. Feel free to ask for contact information for Craig. I'll be more than happy to put you in touch with him. He's a fantastic person, and you probably see that already. But more than anything else, Craig, I really appreciate you spending some time with me and talking through some of this. I think I've learned a couple of words here that I'm gonna have to start.
That's great. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Me too. Thank you so much.